Okay, so welcome to our monthly UCIPM webinar series. We are thrilled today to have Janet Hartin with us to talk about trees for a changing climate. Janet Hartin is a UC Cooperative Extension Environmental Horticulture Advisor in San Bernardino, Los Angeles, and Riverside counties. Her research and extension focuses on identifying drought, heat, and pest-resistant landscape trees that cool urban heat islands and mitigate climate change. She is a sought-after speaker, regularly presenting talks to green industry professionals, fellow academics, and UC Master Gardener volunteers. So Janet, I am going to stop sharing and turn it over to you. And thank you. Take it away when you're ready.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm going to start to share my screen here in a moment. And I'm really excited to further what we're doing in landscape horticulture through the industry, through community groups, and through you to improve the shade coverage of our urban landscapes. Today's discussion will focus on trees for a changing climate. I am Janet Hartin. And please feel free to email me should you have further questions that we don't get to in the discussion after my talk, or if you sleep on a few of them, wake up and these are burning questions and you want to chat, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'll also be sending a link to the PowerPoint to Carrie and her team, and I welcome your use of that. Unfortunately, in California, we not only have a moisture drought, but we also have a tree drought. While we still have a density of trees that's certainly notable, it's decreased by 30% since 1988. So currently, our California cities have the lowest tree canopy per capita of only 108 square yards in the United States of America. So the picture on the right denotes an urban neighborhood. This one's in Southern California, void completely of street trees. There's three main reasons for this, and they'll be communicated throughout my presentation. Number one, when we have the flowing of resources, we tend to have municipal funds for certified arborists and urban foresters to not only ensure that the right tree for the right location is planted, but also that important ongoing care practices are mandated and there's not a hiccup or a skip if something happens to the budget and or COVID and things change at the city level. So that's the number one reason. The number two reason is that we do have invasive species. In Southern California, one of those that's very bothersome because it attacks healthy rather than already weakened trees is the invasive shothole borer. And of course, while we hope we can curb its movement up the coast and into the Central Valley in Northern California, there's really no guarantee of that. So we need to continue to project into the future what heat, pest, and drought-tolerant trees are going to look like that can stand up to the pressures of climate change and increasingly hot urban climates. The third reason is that besides street trees, we have side yard and backyard trees, and in our more dense housing developments, we'd like to see more parking lot trees. For instance, apartments and condominiums tend to have many more per capita per area, but far fewer trees that are commensurate with that increase in density. So we don't have necessarily a network of advisors to ensure that residents of multifamily dwellings or single-family dwellings know where to go to get help on what the right species of trees are for their location. Most of you are here because you've heard of, or perhaps you're somehow involved in University of California Ag and Natural Resources. I'm sure we have some volunteers on today, master gardeners in particular, are those that have a lot of services as far as helping those select trees that will be viable through the next decades, when we really, really want to increase that tree canopy, particularly in underserved and vulnerable communities. So I think it's important as a cooperative extension advisor to continue through tweets and social media our, if you will, our promotion of the fact we have over 6,000 Master Gardener volunteers in the state that can help our members of urban communities select and grow the correct species of trees. The picture on the left shows a week ago's most updated U.S. drought monitor. It's updated every Thursday, and when I put these slides together this morning, today's wasn't up yet. So we're exactly a week behind schedule, but that's close enough because unfortunately the situation hasn't changed. Most of California is in at least a moderate drought. As you can see on this picture, nearly 100% of Californians are in D1 or D0, which is abnormal dry conditions. And we've got double digits of Californians in exceptional drought. We have a lot of climate change resources within UCANR, and I'll share these with you via Carrie, but this is the link to a blog I wrote that includes dozens of these resources. Here's a few examples. The IPM Green blog is a wonderful resource, and they've categorized specific climate change topics into one grouping. We have a lot of UC climate change videos. We have talks and podcasts that I'm linking on climate variability and change, trends and impacts on California agriculture. Another wonderful and really rich resource is the California Institute for Water Resources. There's a lot of blogs, podcasts, conversations. So I invite you to visit their fantastic website. We've really grown the next one, the UCANR Wildfire Resources website. That's just, it seems like by the week, becoming really filled with live, active kinds of resources. We also have the main website that also has links and updates regarding fire resources and information, preparing home landscaping, as well as our UCANR free publications, a few examples, keeping plants alive under drought and water restrictions. We have that resource in Spanish as well as English, use of gray water in urban landscapes, and then a wide variety of other UC but non-ANR researchers. Daniel Swain is a prime example of somebody that's really actively disseminating information out there on this topic. So non-UC climate change resources include these. There's also about 10 others that I don't have linked here because of the restraint in time, but they are linked on the full resource page that Carrie will share with you and that I've linked on the slide 3 slides back. We also have a lot of information on what UCANR specialists and advisors work regards as far as water requirements of landscape trees and public policy changes due to our research. So those of you that want to take a deep dive, here's the link to those papers. The bottom line being, from the perspective of this presentation, is that trees and edibles really should come first under drought and water restrictions when we're talking about urban water usage. And I think I want to preface the remainder of my talk with this. Yes, we need to conserve urban water. And yes, about half of urban water is regarding keeping landscape plants and garden plants alive, or at least attempting to, even if water is misdirected. But there's a balance between water conservation in our urban areas and ensuring that we're keeping our trees and edibles alive during and through the drought and water restrictions. So this is so important because the ecosystems that trees provide, that I'm going to be sharing with you in a couple slides, are such that over time, they actually enhance. So if we're constantly having to replant trees at 8, 10, even 20 years old, we've lost 8, 10, 20 years of ecosystem, and for that matter, societal resources that these trees otherwise would have provided. I'm not going to go into each of these points because this could be an entire class on the benefits of urban trees, but there's a few that I really want to concentrate and pivot toward. One of the most important benefits of trees are their ability to cool urban heat islands. We call those UHIS. They also provide shade in the process. So these first 2 points are linked together. They also result in energy savings in buildings and our vehicles if we're parked in the shade rather than on top of an asphalt parking lot that's unshaded. They're great at removing dust and absorbing pollutants. And of course, during photosynthesis, they take in carbon dioxide, including what we give them, to a much lesser degree than what they're overdosing on, which are the combustible fossil fuels. So the line of thinking that what's wrong with climate change because trees need carbon dioxide is that there's way too much. So the footprint isn't green unless we curb our human man-made output of these fossil fuels and look at alternative sources of energy. I'll talk a little bit about how trees absorb and store carbon dioxide. We call that process sequestration. Urban trees don't have the ability to sequester anywhere near the carbon dioxide that forests do. We just don't have the amount of them and the density. But as they grow and mature, several species do a pretty good job of that. Other benefits are beautifying neighborhoods, increasing property values, reducing crime, improving mental and emotional health, providing a noise barrier, providing a windbreak barrier, of course, habitat, enhancing populations of pollinators, many, many others. The last 2 years, I've been concentrating on measuring urban heat islands, and I was astounded at the results. What I found is even in spring in our inland cities, surface temperatures of unshaded asphalt can be 40 to 66 degrees hotter than shaded asphalt. And along the coast, you're going to see the shorter side of that equation, more like 40 to 45 degrees. But it's still very impactful when literally to get our dog to the dog park with the grassy areas that through transpiration are actually cooling the environment, we have to perhaps park in an asphalt parking lot, carry our pets across the asphalt because they'll burn their paws, just to be able to find them some shelter and some play areas. So the good news is, and I try to be a milk glass or a water glass half full kind of person, is the next best time to plant a tree, if we didn't do it yesterday, is today. With the caveat that not literally today, but within a month or so, when temperatures cool down even more. That's for the benefit of the trees. The tree in this parking lot, I've been following for several years. Its ecosystem and societal benefits are such that, that not only has energy been conserved, but we've had a reduction in that urban heat island very, very substantially. Here's some pictures that show temperatures both in centigrade and Fahrenheit. Starting on the left, unshaded black asphalt, artificial turf, concrete, and on the far right, living turf. So another premise is that living entities, whether they be human or whether they be plant life, not only require inputs, but they provide all kinds of benefits. Growing plants cool through transpiration their surrounding area very, very significantly. So I know that there's a big push for lawn removal and replacing it with artificial turf, but artificial turf is just about as hot as asphalt. So in inland areas, we don't subscribe to that as being a best practice. This is hard to look at, but I think it's important to look at that pet paws can burn in a minute on 140 Fahrenheit surface, and that can be an air temperature of only 90 degrees. I was in San Francisco last weekend speaking to an incredible and very passionate group of San Francisco and San Mateo UCCE Master Gardeners. And it was warm when I was up there. So even along the coast in fall, we're seeing temperatures that are approaching 90 degrees. Even on 160 surface, within 30 seconds, there can be severe second and third degree burns on our pets' paws. The bottom line is that many Californians live and work in really dismal environments. We can all make a difference. Work with your cities, work with your nonprofits and neighbors to enhance tree canopy to at least 25%. The other thing that's hand in hand, as I alluded to earlier, with right tree, right place, is right care. Improper tree selection, location, and care reduce their average longevity 50 to 70%. So this is huge. The picture in the middle depicts an urban tree canopy in a park that's about 85 to 90%. Fantastic. That's a good example. The tree on the left that's been topped, literally, I heard a chainsaw when I was doing an International Society of Arboriculture webinar, looked out my window, and this had been half topped. On the right, we need to remember that if we don't have city arborists, and we have trees that are perfectly viable for the climate zone, but without the arborists and the crew, because they were laid off when times got rough, we have this girdling of the trunk and literally cutting into the xylem and phloem, the water and food conducting tissues of that tree, that at this point it's pretty far gone. So any of the trees that we bring home, we want to make sure that we loosen those ties. Sometimes those green twisties, as we call them, might have 6 or 8 separate ties up and down the trunk. So it's really important to loosen those. Again, for those of you that want to take a deeper dive, here's a paper that was published in 2015. It's on the costs of maintaining and not maintaining the urban forest, a review of the urban forestry and arboriculture literature. It's really important that we think most about our underserved and our vulnerable community members. I'm going to show you some slides that show a correlation, but certainly not a cause and effect of why this is so important. We need to help all residents, but especially those that are in, again, some dire situations without the tree canopy. We need to help empower residents of California to take action. This is a beautiful neighborhood. This is up in Atherton in San Mateo County. You can see that per the recommendation, lots of parks, high tree canopies. It tends to be a very high wealth neighborhood compared to others in California. If you look at the stats on the left, the percentile poverty is only 2. Very low incidence of pulmonary and cardiovascular issues, very low percentile of particulate matter. If you look on the right, you'll see a lot of orange, and that represents a tree canopy of 42 to 89%. Compare that to a neighborhood that's adjacent to our former UC Cooperative Extension office in the city of San Bernardino, mostly dark blue. That represents a tree canopy of 0 to 11%. This is the perfect neighborhood to enhance tree canopy in because we already have a percentile poverty of 99. We have high incidence of pulmonary and cardiovascular conditions, and we have high levels of pollution. So I want to turn the tide and talk about what we've done and what we can continue to do together regarding these issues that I've brought up. So again, fill your glasses with water or whatever, whatever you might be drinking right now, because it's far from too late. We just need to band together and make these important decisions now. So along those lines, kudos to the Inland Empire Resource Conservation District, their partners, which not only were our master gardeners and myself because of the Trees for Tomorrow project, but big partner in here was the California Climate Action Corps. We also had University of Redlands, we had ESRI, and many schools, many nonprofits involved in the last 3 years in getting recommended heat, drought, and pest-resistant trees in the ground, working with communities that are most in need of them. We have about 701 trees in the ground as of this presentation date. It's been really a pleasure for me the last 8 years to work with fellow ANR colleagues, Jim Downer, Darren Haver from UC Davis, Allison Berry, and also this project is largely driven by the United States Forest Service, recently retired Greg McPherson, who we still contact, and he's still such a foundational resource. Natalie and Erica have taken over management from the Forestry Service perspective of the project. So it's truly a partnership between UC and the Forest Service. The idea was, let's start measuring the performance of trees that our best guess is that they can withstand the pressures of climate change and urban heat islands. Let's get them in the ground. Let's make sure that they're heat, drought, and pest tolerant. And originally we were looking at 20 to 25 years, but now we're shortening that. So the first iteration is 5 years. The water's turned off. How are they doing? And then 10, 15, 20 years. Are they still doing all right? So I wanted to explain a little bit about how these trees were selected and how they're doing. The first thing was we looked at projected climates. There are 3 models that CalAdapt represents, and we looked at these 3 models and we took a moderate approach to attaining the 25% or higher tree canopy based on these projections over the next 75 years. We chose trees for our study based on their habitat, their physiology, and their biological interactions. We consulted experts. Several of you listening to this webinar are probably on that short list. We also cross-referenced trees for their rarity. We chose trees that currently represent less than 1% of a typical Southern California tree canopy. We have a trial up in Davis, and we have a trial in Irvine at South Coast Research and Extension Center. We planted these trees back in 2016 in the fall. We irrigated them at 80% of their evapotranspiration rate. We then halved the water. So we were irrigating them at 50% once they were established. And going into the first full 3rd year, which actually was March 2020, that probably rings the COVID bell in your head like it does mine. But that was pre-planned. That's when we turned the water completely off. The picture on the right shows 3 of the species doing really, really well through now with no supplemental water whatsoever. I wanted to also throw out something that may sound controversial, but I believe it's science-based. Unfortunately, while a native plant palette is a fantastic starting point, our natives that do well are dwindling because of urban heat islands and other impacts of climate change that are reflected in the fact that Joshua Tree National Park, which is 30 miles north of me, I live out here in Palm Springs area, the seeds of the Joshua tree are only germinating at least 500, 600 feet above the mother plant. So we can't rely solely on natives, but they're a fantastic starting point. And when we're talking about the urban forest interface, then definitely we need to start with natives. So for the purposes of our research, we looked at what we viewed as current and expected non-invasive trees. We looked at mostly from the southwest United States as far as their nativeness, but we also looked at continents halfway around the world. Trees doing well. I wanted to finish the presentation with showing you a really quick tour of what these trees look like and introduce you just briefly to 3 search engines by which you can select for your climate zone appropriate trees based on several criteria that you can select by. So the netleaf hackberry doing great. Again, I'm going to go quickly and these slides will be available. So I'm not going to read all the points about the trees. The sunset zones are listed. This is the website that is the select tree that I'm going to link later on. This is one of the searchable websites that has a lot of our trees featured and a lot of other trees. So the sunset zones are preferred over USDA zones because they're more precise and they're smaller. USDA zones are great for the farming community in northern states that need to know first and foremost, what's the last predicted frost date? We need to know about heat and drought. One of my favorites is the maverick mesquite, the Prosopis glandulosa, doing fantastic. The care sheet. This is probably tied with my favorite, the red push pistache. Most of these grow really well up and down the central valleys as well as desert, and many of them along the coast as well. You can check that out. Strange name, Bubba Desert Willow, but beautiful tree. There's information on that. We also looked at lower maintenance trees, and those in the case of this one that can tolerate our alkaline soils that we have in California. Indian rosewood, fantastic park tree, caution. It's not going to do well under power lines. Trees that grow higher than 30 feet aren't recommended under power lines. You can see the bubba on the left that grows 35 feet, and there's the Indian rosewood on the right that grows 60 feet. Already, we're seeing these trees of size, even after just 8 years of transplanting them at the UC Riverside site from 15-gallon containers. Information on all of these is widely available on the Select Tree website. Ghost gum. The escarpment live oak. Deer resistant, attracts a lot of pollinators. Here's the websites. Again, we'll share them and have a follow-up email regarding these links you can click on. So the 3 that I'm going to finish up real quickly going over are the Urban Forest Ecosystem, the Cal Poly website, the California Native Plant Society website, and our own UC WUCOLS or WUCOLS, tomato or tomato, your choice, the water use classification of landscape species website. I talked about sunset zones before. They're precise. In colder areas of California, largely mountain regions, then USDA zones are great. Otherwise, we strongly recommend that you pivot over to using sunset zones. On a lot of these search engines, you can select USDA or the sunset zones. So this shows the San Francisco Bay Area and Northern California websites that would be linked through these, the sunset zones that would be linked through the 3 websites. And in Southern California, you see that already we're talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sunset zones, which compared to only 9 USDA zones in the whole state shows how precise that they are. So if you go to this website, for the Bay Area, I pulled up last night some recommended species. This is the screen when you click search by characteristics. And I didn't limit the height of the tree, so I picked up to 100 feet. I picked under sunset zones 15, 16, and 17, which again are Bay Area friendly. And I just picked low or very low water. And you can see the number of trees that popped up. You can click on these thumbnails and you'll get those sheets, those information sheets that I shared earlier about each of these trees. Some really beautiful trees. The next one I want to share is the California Native Plant Society website, calscape.org. It's beautiful, great starting point. Make sure though that you back check any of the natives you find on here with the Select Tree website, because it's a little bit more up to date on how these natives are actually doing under today's conditions. So if you go into advanced search there, you'll see that my very, very narrow search was a tree, extremely low, very low, or low water requirement, a height not to exceed 30 feet. Voila, there's only 12 plants native to California that fit those characteristics. The skinnier the search, it goes without saying, the fewer results. So you can't be too picky, but when it comes to pest resistance, that's a good starting point, only second to the general climate zone and microclimate conditions around the building or the residence that the trees will be planted. In this case, I just searched by city and all plant types, and CalScape indicates there's 782 native plants to redlands. That doesn't mean that they're all growing in redlands well now, but there's 782 plants native to redlands. Yucaipa, 399 plants. Advanced search for Yucaipa, a tree with extremely low, very low or low water requirements, whittles it down to 15 plants. Again, you'd want to then cross-reference whether these trees are a good pick for the location. This website is great because it started out very user-friendly with the list of nurseries, which is important to attain these trees from. That's a really difficult thing to be able to maintain. So there's some newer nurseries that aren't on here. And some of these nurseries that are listed are no longer in business or carrying all of these plants, but it's a great starting point. And you can also search by flower color and flowering season. So here's an example of a plant recommended for Yucaipa. You can click on the thumbnails. This is the coastal oak, the Quercus agrifolia. And I think I have time, yes I do, it's about 12:40, to spend 5 minutes and then a quick wrap up on our University of California WUCOLS website. Again, that's the Water Use Classification of Landscape Species website. I think that the most important use of this is to look at the categories as far as water use. You'll see that it's classified by very low, low, medium, or high water needs. And this links directly with the Department of Water Resources list. So this website gets millions, literally millions of hits a year, because when designers, landscape architects, cities that are putting in new landscapes need to look at plant palettes, they need to have a percent that at very low or low water use will thrive and survive. So this is the go-to website by which the classifications are being used at the statewide level. So when you get to the WUCOLS website, you can first select a region. There's 6 regions here, and then you'll get a drop down of cities. So I selected arbitrarily South Inland Valley, and here's a little secret. I'm looking at about half of these cities having exactly the same recommended list of trees that will populate, but it's nice still to be able to pull it down by city. So many of them are in the exact same climate zone. So you could do this based on whichever of those 6 state regions that you're in. So here's a search where I dug down. I selected San Diego and water use, very low and low, tree. That's all I selected. So let's see what happens. All right, 249 results. Like these other sites, you can click on the thumbnail and pull up care information. And just like the CalScape website, I suggest that you back check this with Select Tree, because that one tends to have the most updated information on which trees currently are doing well and if any have unfortunately entered the dark zone, the invasive plant zone list. Just some examples from that search for San Diego. Again, there were over 200, so that's just a snapshot. So I just want to say thank you so much for your time. I will follow up, and if there's questions, happy to mute myself and have Carrie and her team address those. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Janet. That was really wonderful information.